Welcome to Step Up Unfiltered, the home of uncensored conversations with extraordinary individuals, tackling life's biggest issues and bridging division. Now, as always, we are live on Luton Urban Radio on the second and fourth Thursday of every single month. For those of you that like to tune in live, obviously just find us on Luton Urban Radio, type it into Google, find the website, we're live. For Spotify listeners, just type in Step Up Unfiltered. YouTube, you can do the same. The episode will be live on both of those on Monday. Step Up Coaching is where you'll find a lot of my coaching content in which I help men open up, overcome limitations and become the best versions of themselves. Now, without further ado, I've got a very prominent guest of mine on TikTok. He's doing big things, very outspoken. I would say probably how he's blown up, he's come all the way, quite a long journey, so really happy to have you on.
No, thank you for having me. I've never been described as an extraordinary individual before, so it's quite flattering.
Well, I mean, people see your TikTok. A lot of people on TikTok probably think you're an extraordinary individual.
I think a lot of people might think I'm a cunt, but we're
language.
Oh,
we're live radio.
We can't swear. Oh shit!
It's alright. It's alright. It's at the start. Right, if you could tell everybody, just come in a little bit.
Yeah, of course.
Your name, your age, your occupation, and a fun fact that people might not know.
Hello, my name is Harry. I'm 24 years old. At the moment, I am a trainee teacher at UCL. An extraordinary fact about myself. You know what? This is probably it's probably the worst question to ever be asked, actually. We should give me more time to think of one.
People struggle with this question.
I always struggle.
I need to prep people for this question.
No, I think it's one of those questions where it's like, what do you say about yourself? I think as you start to, you look at things and you're like, oh, maybe I actually am really boring. To be honest, let's come back to that one. Ask me at the end.
That's fine. Okay, so just so everybody knows what we're going to be talking about, we've got lots of fun topics to dive into, and one of the things that I'd say Harry's really good at is making topics that might be boring to some, things that we really should be informed about, making them interesting. So we're going to be talking about his background, his title of the Champagne Socialist.
Yeah, of course.
We'll be talking about the election, Trump winning, thoughts on that, left versus right. We'll be talking about DEI, masculinity. So we've got a lot of hot topics to talk about, just so you know how the course of the episode is going to run. So first things first, very interesting tag name. We'll dig into it just in a bit. But could you tell us a little bit about your background?
My background, so I was born in London. I lived there for a couple of years. I then moved to the outskirts of Milton Keynes, where I've lived since. I was state educated. I then went to sixth form, then university. I finished university about 2 years ago. That's when I started doing TikTok, in the middle of my second year, I believe it was. I then graduated, did TikTok for a fair bit, then decided I wanted to do something a bit more meaningful because TikTok isn't really a real job. So I decided I was going to become a teacher. So I applied to go to UCL teacher training. They accepted me. I'm very thankful for that. And I'm currently in the process of learning how to become a teacher for further education. So that is basically 16 and above. So at the moment I teach access courses, which is for people who haven't gone through traditional pathways of education. Typically you would expect someone in this country to do primary, secondary, sixth form, then go on to university. This is for people who haven't gone through those pathways for whatever reason. There's all manner of reasons. So variety of different ages who basically decided, you know what, I want to do something, I want to gain I want to gain an education, and I'm going to go back to college, do an access course, which is a year-long course. The end grade is equivalent to 3 A levels, which is what you would need in order to get into university. And essentially that's where they go from there. So basically my job is to, future job is going to be just to help people be the best that they can be.
Nice. Similar to Set-Up coaching, but probably a different target market. So when you said they don't go through, I guess, the traditional method of schooling, let's say, what kind of methods do they go through, and what are some of the reasons, if you don't mind?
It's multifaceted, really. It's multifaceted, really. It can be for whatever reason. Let's say they've come from a deprived background, for example. Sure. They haven't had the support in school. if they've got SEN, special education needs, if they've got dyslexia, autism, all manner of different complications, maybe issues at home. For whatever reason, they haven't gone through the traditional educational pathway. Let's say they've then left school at 16, whatever age. They are now in their 20s and they're like, I want to go to university. They've perhaps missed out. That's how they see themselves. In this country, it's very difficult to get any sort of high-paying job without a degree, unless you do an apprenticeship, for example. So they decide, you know what, I'm going to go back to university, and I'm going to go back to college. I'm going to do an access course, and then I will go on to university and see where I end up. And it's just about, you're dealing with people who have all manner of issues, and it's just about learning how to deal with those. So that's what I'm kind of learning how to do, really. And I find it fascinating because I always thought I'd end up doing a placement at, let's say, like a sixth form college, like one that is attached to a school. That's not what I'm doing, and to be honest, I'm kind of glad now, because I think it's something out of my comfort zone. It's not something that I ever did. But I know people who are doing access courses at the moment, and they love doing them, and I'm more than happy to start delivering one.
And what would you say the benefits? Because I always say to my coaching clients that, all the learning that takes place, the best learning is always when you take yourself out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
You have to be in that zone, not be in your panic zone.
Yeah.
But you need to be in that zone where you're pushing yourself.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So what would you say the benefits are from pushing yourself outside your comfort zone?
I mean, you never know until you know. I guess that's what I would say. Fucking hell, sound like I'm doing LinkedIn posts. No, what I would say is, for me, it was something I'd never done before. I had only ever presented to my peers when teaching a concept, and I've done that amongst my peer group at the moment for our teaching class, and I'm explaining concepts that they aren't familiar with, which means I have to then adapt how I learn. And just doing that, I find it's fascinating. I'm a big football fan, and it's essentially just like a form of coaching. You know what? I've got an objective. Essentially, with the people I'm teaching, they want to get to university. They want to get that access course grade, and my teaching, my tactics has to enable them to do that. It's a two-way street, of course, but I would definitely say for the teacher, it is more sort of 55 rather than 50-50.
Yeah, and I think my personal view is that the smartest people in the world, or some of the richest people in the world, are not the people that are the most book smart. They're the people that can convey a very complex message and make it simple so everybody can understand.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of, I guess to a certain extent. I think if you're looking at accumulating wealth, there's different factors to consider. But for sort of myself doing what I'm doing at university at the moment, it's about me also trying to better myself, but also hoping to better other people in the future.
Of course, yeah. I mean, when I say that, I'm not talking about it's money.
Yeah,
I mean more in a sense that I think being able just to, because not everybody can do that. Convey something that's, as I said at the start, something that's maybe seen something quite boring or something you might be put off by some of the stuff that we see in the news.
Well, yeah.
You make that engaging.
Well, yeah, that's the whole thing. I find with teaching, I teach, my subject specialty is politics. That's what I want to teach, hopefully in the future. And it has the potential to become a very dry and dusty subject. It's about making it interesting, which means
dry and dusty teachers.
We all remember a dry and dusty teacher, but we also remember really engaging teachers.
Facts.
And a lot of the teachers and what we're finding is in our class when we're talking about what kind of teacher we want to become, we'll always say, I had a teacher who did this and I want to do that. And essentially, some of the people on my course are in their sort of 40s, 50s, who remember teachers they had back when they were sort of like 13, 14 years old. And you think of that sort of time, that 27 years, for example, that they can still remember what that teacher did. Obviously, 27, it's only like a life sentence, I suppose. That's the way I can contextualize it. But it shows you how effective that teaching method was, and the fact that you want to continue doing that, I think, pays great respect to yourself and also great homage to the teachers that you've had in the past.
Yeah, agreed. And I always say in psychology, you remember one positive belief for every 4 negatives. Yeah. And a lot of those can come sometimes from teachers. Yeah. So a lot of those, you might remember some of your good experiences with teachers, but you remember definitely some of the bad ones.
Oh yeah, 100%. I remember teachers that I had at school when I was in secondary who I wouldn't say they wrote me off, but it was clear. I was always referred to as a pleasure to teach. I don't know how you were referred to as in school.
I was referred to as, I had a teacher say to me that you're not going to get anywhere in life with just John. And I got an A in my psychology sixth form.
Yeah.
And I literally
Well, see,
close to sticking my middle finger out. She was crying. I was like, nah, F you.
When I was in year 11, I got told by the then head of sixth form that I wasn't smart enough to do A levels, that I was going to struggle.
Wow.
And to be fair, that first year of A levels, she did have a point because I did drop out. But I think that was more because of what I was doing, and I was like, actually, and there were other issues as well.
Sure.
And so then I decided, you know what, I'm going to go to a different place. I'm going to sort of do 3 proper A levels this time, and at the end, sort of go, hey, you know what? I got into university. I got CDE at A level, which wasn't great, but it got me into uni because I had an unconditional from De Montfort, and now I'm at UCL, which is one of the top 5, which is one of the top universities in this country. So, you know, it's I've done all right.
Yeah,
So
you've
I've
done
done okay.
You've done well.
I've done
You've
okay.
done well. So obviously you're very well spoken. You tell us why you decided to call yourself the Champagne Socialist.
So, for those who aren't familiar, a champagne socialist is someone who, kind of, the official definition is lives a life of luxury but has socialist ideas and principles.
I googled it.
Yeah, and you probably tell me. Yeah. So
I was like, oh, okay.
the reason the account is called the Champagne Socialist is because when I first started getting into politics at the age of about 13, 14 years old, just engaging with the news, my parents, for context, my family background is my mother is from Nottingham originally. And she grew up in a very much in a working class household, ex-mining community, so she basically saw deindustrialization happen in real time. And as a result of that, she saw hardship and experienced it as well. A lot of my politics derives from my mother's early years, and that's where my idea of justice and society comes from. My father is from the Netherlands, who grew up, I'm sure he won't begrudge me saying this, very well off.
Yeah.
And I would say it's a combination of, so basically my politics is largely shaped by my parents. And I remember when I started getting into politics and I would talk about various things that were going on, and my mother would go, oh, you little champagne socialist. And then it always stuck with me. And then
So can I just butt in there? So who do you tend to side with more in your views, your mum or your dad?
I would say more, I'd say it's a mixture, it's a combination really. My father could easily be described as sort of like a centrist dad, but I would say mainly because he can only participate in politics only so much. Like, he can't vote in general elections in this country. He can vote in locals, for example, but I would say a lot of his observations as someone who lives in this country, has lived here for like 25 years now, I think 26, and has kind of seen it all gone on and kind of observed it and is experiencing it. My mother is someone who is an active participant within politics. She votes, attends protest movements. So for me, it's I'd say it's a bit of both. There are things I agree with my parents on, there are things that we disagree on. I would definitely say as it became very much clear that we were going to have a Labour government, and I was quite scathing of them around the dinner table, and it was like, well, we're going to have a Tory government, and you would prefer, and it's like, well, no, but I'm telling you now, we won't notice that much change. So there was a little bit of that, but that's kind of what I would say.
Yeah, no, interesting. So how does being middle class shape your views? And does, like, when people hear kind of champagne socialist, do they think in their head that's a contradiction, or?
Well, yeah, I mean it's supposed to be an oxymoron.
Of course.
I would say your class shouldn't determine your politics. You know.
Do you think it does?
I think it can, for sure, but I don't think it should necessarily put you in a box as such. You know, if you look at my demographic as a straight white man, I should be voting Conservative or potentially for Reform UK.
Yeah.
I don't want to because I don't agree with them. I didn't vote Labour at the last election. I voted for the Green Party for different reasons.
Sure.
I couldn't bring myself to endorse the Labour government, and I explained this to councillors when they knocked on our door during the locals. They knocked on the door and they said, "Are you going to vote for us?" And I said, "No." And you seem like lovely people. I haven't spoken to you, but I'm not going to vote for you at the locals because I know my vote's going to be interpreted as an endorsement of a future Labour government. At the election, I didn't vote for them. I technically did have to vote for them because I was a proxy vote for 2 people, and they wanted me to vote Labour, which I did because that's what they wanted me to do.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, you can get that. I think I knew full well when I started talking about politics back in 2020 on TikTok that people would hear the way that I spoke, the way that I presented, and hear what I was saying and go, oh, well, you know, you're clearly from this background, but you hold these beliefs, and the term champagne socialist probably would have come up, and I thought, well, let's just call the account that and just cut to the straight away. Like, you know what? I'm middle class and I'm left wing. You know what? That's I'm not the first person to do it, and I certainly won't be the last. But I don't think it's been that much of an issue, bar like the first maybe month of doing TikTok. I think people kind of just become used to it. And someone might comment that, but because of the amount of comments my videos get, I'm not necessarily going to see it. So
he's killing it, basically. That's what he's trying to say.
maybe normally
he's doing all right. He's doing all right. We'll get onto the TikTok. But what I wanted to ask you, I completely agree that you should never be boxed in. We'll go into this further down
of course,
in the podcast, but I'm definitely someone that grew up being completely liberal, and now I've gone centre right, even maybe more centre.
Of course, for sure.
Like I think a lot of young men have, being completely honest. Will you always be on the left, do you think? Do you think we'll always be left?
So there's an interesting thing where people always say to you when you're sort of my age, 24, maybe a little bit younger, and they say, oh, as you get older, you're going to go more right. When you start earning more money and taxes start creeping in. I would say the opposite has happened. I would say about 4 years ago, you could describe me as being a bit of a liberal, which I find a disgusting word because I don't like liberals. I found myself as I was getting older and seeing the various things that were going on in this country, the RMT strikes back in 2022. I was doing some work with the Communication Workers Union, CWU, at one of their rallies that they had in partnership with Trade Union Congress, and speaking with trade union officials, everyday ordinary people who are united by one common goal, which is basically we want the best terms and conditions for our workers. And these are people from all walks of life. And you see people that you could attribute as being like strong men, for example, and these are people who have very staunchly held beliefs. And that to me is kind of where I see role models come from. And so for me, I think as I get more involved in teaching and I'm already part of the teaching unions, I see myself only staying where I am, perhaps even going further. I'd say there are certain times where I've been in workplaces where I felt completely radicalised, where I found myself pushing further left and feeling like, right, we need a coup here, but maybe not that. I've definitely, I can't see myself going any. Unless, I tell you what, maybe when the money dries up and I find myself in a sort of True Geordie situation, for example, like he is at the moment, or that, what's his name, Dapper Laughs, is that the guy? You know, the guy you see on your TikTok, your social media feed back in 2014. I've seen he started going down that route, and maybe when the money dries up for me, I'll consider doing it, but not right now.
I don't think it's the money. I think it's more of just a case of, I think because I've watched a couple of True Geordie videos recently. And I think it's a case of, people like here or even me, like we don't really pay attention to UK politics much because as you just said, you don't see much of a change. I didn't even vote. Yeah. So it's not like a thing.
Well, you're not.
I've never voted Conservative.
Turnout was 52% at the last election, so you're not alone doing that, and I don't blame people for not turning out.
People just fed up with it. It's just like, what's going to happen? What's going to change?
Yeah.
The price is going to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Whereas I'm more interested in what's going on in the US. I know it's bad to say. It's just more entertaining.
Well, yeah, but I would say our politics in this country has kind of become Americanized. So 20 years ago, if you suggested the idea of doing a leaders debate, people would have gone, piss off, we're not America.
Yeah.
Nowadays, leaders debates are common.
Yeah.
We have them for internal party contests where you have, back in 2019 when they were deciding who was going to become the next leader of the Conservative Party, the BBC was hosting those debates. Nowadays for London mayoral elections, you'll have the Labour candidate maybe debating the Conservative candidate, maybe a bit with more candidates on there. So our politics is becoming slowly Americanised, and I can understand why people see American politics as a bit of a show, because it is. You look at the amount of money involved in it.
And the people leading as well.
Well, yeah, no, essentially, and it's like, these sort of, that's the way that they do things.
Yeah.
So I can understand the appeal, but I think in this country, people do need to pay more attention. I'd
Yeah,
say
agreed.
politics is something that people in this country focus on. Maybe the average person maybe focuses on for 6 weeks every 5 years.
Agreed.
You know, ask someone how they're voting in the locals. They go, when are they?
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, people don't-
and you know what? That's fine, because that's just the way that it's fine in the extent of that's how people have sort of grown up. But more people do need to get involved.
Yeah, I agree.
It's about showing people why this stuff matters for sure.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more. I don't know nowhere near enough about UK politics. I know way more about US politics.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why people, and we'll go into this further, but I think the reason why people have become more from the centre to the left, to the centre, from the left,
Yeah.
it's just because of like the woke ideology, cancel culture, all these different things that I think a lot of people just don't agree with, which
Okay.
seems to be kind of, what's the word? There's a word that I had in my head. Sensationalized
Okay.
from the left.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, people like Kamala Harris, they're obviously I think a huge reason as to why she lost, which I think has gone down under the radar, is the whole trans women versus biological women in sport. I think things like that is things that
Did she bring that up? I don't remember her.
she did bring up in 2019, trans in prison.
But the year's 2024 now, so
True, but she has also mentioned it this year
she mentioned. When did she mention?
in one of her speeches.
So do you think that was the sole reason that she lost?
I think
It's
it's
pretty much
something
stuff
that the left has tried to act like it's something that didn't
Well,
have any
let's, I
effect
mean,
at all.
Kamala Harris is not left wing in the slightest. She's a neoliberal for sure. The Democrats, if you look at, are you familiar with the Overton window?
No.
So
You're
the Overton window, for people listening who aren't sure, is basically deemed what is acceptable within political frames. So typically, you will have like a line, you'll have left, right, and then you'll have a big circle, and that's the Overton window.
Okay.
So it's ideas that are deemed acceptable. So let's say something like gay marriage, for example, same-sex marriage. 60 years ago would never have been in the Overton window. It wouldn't have even been an idea that would have been discussed because it was seen as so taboo. By 2013, that was an idea that most people could agree on. That was in the Overton window, right?
Yeah.
So essentially, when you look at the Democrats and the Republicans, a lot of they are very much firmly in the Overton window. You have the Democrats, who are very much, I would say, centre-right.
Yeah.
You could attribute them to mainly being like our sort of the Conservative Party maybe about 14 years ago in this country. The Republicans are way to the right and are right on sort of the fringes of the Overton window, I would argue, in terms of the things that they talk about.
I think things have changed.
Really?
Yeah, I think a lot of people. Okay, forget the right and the left.
Okay, yeah.
I think a lot of people. I think the easiest way to explain this. I think a lot of people that vote for Trump aren't these crazy far right people.
No, so yeah.
And I think the left makes you feel like if you don't agree with something that I might think. I think the whole trans thing in sport is ridiculous.
Okay.
You might disagree, but I think that's ridiculous. And I hear what you're trying to say, that these things take time for your average person.
Yeah, so I mean,
but I feel like they make you feel like if you don't agree with us, then you're homophobic, and I think that's the thing that's turned your average person off.
yeah, I mean, so with the US election, the main concern was the economy, right?
Yeah,
This was the
of
concern,
course.
and
And immigration.
essentially, yeah, immigration and the economy.
Agreed.
I mean, and basically, I think what we need to remember is that the Democrats didn't offer a vision. The Democrats had been in charge for 4 years. The reason that Joe Biden became president in 2020 was because of the way that Trump had handled COVID, and because of him as a person.
Yep.
And so that's why the Democrats could easily run on a campaign of, right, this is what we're going to do about COVID, and by the way, I'm not Trump.
Yeah.
They get it, right?
Agreed. And I think what people forget as well is, although he gets a lot of banter about being Sleepy Joe, nice guy.
Yeah, I mean, he was a nice guy. Apart from the genocide that he's facilitating over in Gaza,
Agreed.
It is a case of looking at that. So then you get 4 years later, and people don't feel that they're better off. They feel that there's no vision for the country under the Democrats.
Sucks.
You then got Trump coming along, an adjudicated rapist, a convicted felon, and he can I say the word rapist?
Rapist,
right. And
Also,
yeah.
there's 45 seconds left to the break.
Okay.
I know you're about to start cooking. So try and make it. Try and make a smaller point. But
Simply, what I would say is, if the Democrats are wondering why they lost, what vision were they offering? I don't think they were offering a vision at all. Essentially, they were banking on Harris not being Trump and becoming the first woman president.
Yeah, black woman president. We can say.
Remove that. I mean, like, what else are they offering? It's a continuation of what we've of what America has experienced over the last 4 years. Yes, their economy was recovering, but they didn't bring that forward.
Completely agree. Absolutely smashed that. And I know you're about to start cooking. We are back. Just been having a good conversation about US politics, and now we will go back into it for you guys. So we'll cycle back around to why you, what you thought, I guess, the Conservatives kind of, well, sorry, not the Conservatives, the Democrats missed out on. But why do you think Trump won the election?
Because he offered a vision, and because people were fed up of the Democrats. They felt that they were going nowhere. I always saw the thing about the price of gas being cheaper back in 2020, but what people need to remember is that it was a pandemic. People weren't really driving around, so of course it's going to be cheaper. It's a bit like with air travel as well. So like, you know, it's those sort of factors that people need to consider. I guess people were fed up, and they decided to give Trump another chance. I can
understand. That's how you feel, isn't it, really?
Yeah, and I guess the other aspect is you have to look at... you know, there's all manner of issues, but I mean, I can understand the appeal of Trump, but really I also don't see it, because I think if you are someone who believes in sort of strong values, believes in the concept of right and wrong, why are you giving your vote to a convicted felon and an adjudicated rapist? Because surely that goes against what you stand for.
I think it's because though some of the weren't some of the charges to do with the shooting his wife a porn star and then trying to cover it up, like stuff like that.
It was falsifying business records, but you know,
I think stuff like that.
Crime's a crime.
I hear what you're trying to say, but I think stuff like that, people are a bit like, all right.
But he's also been legally recognised as a rapist, as we can say. It was ruled in. A judge said it was true that he had raped a woman by the last name of Carroll. So it's those sort of things that I don't get. I also think when you look at some of his cabinet picks, I mean, involving Elon Musk so heavily, he was a loser. I'm sorry, he's a loser. In terms of just the way that he behaves, the way that he conducts himself, I just think, why are you so tragic? Like, you're the richest man in the world. And
he's a pretty smart guy.
But this is the thing. Like when you talk about certain things, like he's leading this Department of Government Efficiency.
I don't think he's a good speaker.
With Vivek Ramaswamy. Yeah. And I was listening to them both talk, and I think, hang on, it's called the Department of Government Efficiency, and two people are leading it. Doesn't seem very efficient. You know, it's just those sort of things. And listening to sort of Vivek talk about how he's going to run it, and one of the things is, remove people who have, from various government departments who have an odd number at the end of their social security number. Why are you going to do that? It's just absolutely ridiculous. And you think, these are people who, essentially, this is a cabinet that was formed by Reddit. And it's just like, it's one of those, I don't know if you've ever seen it, where people make like, like fantasy football, and people like put teams together.
Yeah.
Essentially, that's kind of what he is doing. You can argue that's the case for most cabinets, but a lot of cabinets are based on around expertise, and I would argue that if you're trying to rally against the whole idea of unelected bureaucrats, it's not a good idea to appoint two unelected people to...
Do you know what I like though? I think the only good thing about it is, I'm not at Elon Musk lover either, but like, I like the fact that he's kind of picked, especially in Vivek's case, like someone that's probably been a little bit more left-leaning when he was younger. I wouldn't say he's like a straight out and out.
I'm sorry, but Vivek
maybe there's going to be a bit. I hope. What we can all hope for. Not that it's going to happen. Yeah. I know Trump has these crazy supporters, but I would hope that he's going to be a bit more inclusive.
I mean, someone like with Vivek, he was massively cast away during the Republican presidential primaries. He did a podcast with a woman called Ann Coulter, who said that she wouldn't vote for him because he's an Indian. Vivek was born in America, and I find that completely insane that somebody like that is more than happy to take insults from people like that, because he gets put in positions of power. He's a very successful man within his own right. But the idea that anyone, I mean, I'm sure we've all been in a place of work where we've dealt with people being derogatory towards us, and we wouldn't accept that. So I understand the idea of wanting to hold power, be in power, but to be disgraced and be degraded in that way. I don't get that.
Self-hate is real, baby.
I mean, I'm not. I used that term. I didn't. Yeah, I can understand why someone would say that.
Yeah, no, I hear that. I think I pretty much agree with your views. I think Trump showed he was going to show change, even when you take it back to like the Barack Obama days.
Yeah.
You know, change. That's what people in America strive on. You know, the American dream. And I think what I see in this election, I'd like to get your views on this. I feel like the whole left-right thing, especially in America, maybe not in the UK as much, is a little bit outdated. I think it was more establishment versus popularist. And from what I saw, I'm not trying to say Trump is going to be this, but he was more speaking to the people and the people's main concerns, where Kamala wasn't doing that at all.
Yeah, so
huge endorsements, like
Liz Cheney, like the people who murdered 1 million people in Iraq. So it's
it's like you're not tapping into the market that you're supposedly all about.
Yeah, so for sure. I mean, yeah, definitely Trump is a populist figure. For those of you who are listening who aren't sure what populism is, it's a political movement that strives to appeal to ordinary people. So in this country, we've had populist movements. Brexit in 2016, vote leave. Arguably Boris Johnson with the Conservatives in 2019. Corbynism to a certain extent in 2017 is a good example of left-wing populism, because people always forget that populism is something that is both left and right. There are different features.
Sure.
So for sure, Trumpism is a populist movement. The MAGA movement is a populist movement. It's an interesting one, but again, it's a very effective campaigning tool. But what does it actually do in power? It gets you in there. Populism around Europe, we're seeing various populist movements. They're getting into positions of power and then finding that they can't go any further. So the Syriza party in Greece in 2015, who were left-wing populists, they wanted to completely destroy the sort of pillars of neoliberalism in Greece. Because remember, around that time there was a big financial crisis. They had Brexit. Famously, they didn't leave the European Union, but they did have a referendum on it. There was very much a movement that people were upset. They were angry. My mother lives in Greece, and you can still see the effects of it to a certain extent to this day. The economic crisis caused a lot of issues, and Greece is a country that has been ravaged throughout the 20th century, even before, most notably by the Nazis. So there was very much a strive to keep Greece as a very proud country, is what I'm trying to say. And the Syriza party failed, because they realised in order to deal with the economic issues in Greece, they had to work with the establishment.
Yeah.
They had to work with the banks. They had to work with the European Union. And so people will feel, well, hang on, we voted for you because you said you were going to completely reject that, but yet here you are working with them.
Yeah.
So again, kind of with Brexit as well, you know, we were told, take back control, 350 million to the NHS.
That was ridiculous. Were you voting for Brexit?
I was 16, so I couldn't vote. So it was, and I remember going there, and I remember watching that election, that referendum, and you know, to me then it was personal. That was, we can get onto this later.
Yeah.
We
can touch on it a little bit now.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to stick. I mean, what I would say is definitely populism is on the rise, and the only way to deal with it is by offering an alternative. The Democrats failed to do that. Simply saying you're not Trump is not going to work, because you're not Trump, I'm not Trump. We know that they weren't Trump.
It was. Yeah, I thought on top of that. So not addressing the main issues. The economy, obviously,
this is the thing.
It was better in Trump's reign. I know, obviously, towards the end, COVID, it wasn't as good. But
also he inherited a strong economy from the Obama days as well.
True.
So it's kind of like when we look at
so when feelings come into play, though.
Yeah, of course. The feelings are a big aspect, and again, we're going to see it in this country where Labour are not going about the way to properly improve people's living standards. This is a government that keeps policies like the two-child welfare cap. which basically means that you can only claim welfare for 2 children. Any child born after 2017, any third child or more, you can't claim welfare for them, which is pushing millions of children into poverty. The policy has not worked, and you'd be forgiven for thinking the whole idea was to put people in poverty. It has encouraged parents to find more work because, again, if you've got young children, you know, childcare is ridiculously expensive in this country. They're going to increase the cap on bus fares from £2 to £3.
So they've raised minimum wage.
Minimum wage is going up, and then if the price of everything else is going, and also minimum wage is a joke. I've done minimum wage work. I think it's £11.44 at the moment. It'll go up to £12 something.
20.
That's not going to cover anything. You know, people say, well, just work more hours. It's like, how many more hours do you want people to work without not having a meaningful life? You can't always be work. We're not all Rihanna. So it's
Not bad.
and again, I mean, they're keeping in conservative cuts to disability welfare as well. The way that disabled people in this country are treated is absolutely despicable. They were actually found guilty by a UN panel of treating disabled people with the utmost contempt. That was under the last Conservative government. You probably didn't hear about that because they wanted to keep that sort of stuff quiet, but they were found guilty of basically treating disabled people not within the rights of...
Really?
Yeah, because what you have to remember is the 2010 Equality Act, disability is a protected characteristic.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And this government, and the last government, and I'd argue this government as well, is not upholding to that. Disabled at some point in all of our lives, we're going to become disabled. That may be a temporary thing. Let's say you're recovering from a surgery, for example. You may develop a mental health issue.
Yeah.
That is considered a disability.
Yeah.
But for some, it's going to be permanent. And I'm not religious in the slightest, but I like the idea of love thy neighbour and do to others as you would have them do to you. And that's sort of part of it. But the contempt that people have for disabled people in particular in this country, it's a result of years of... It's a result of
depiction in the media, by politicians as well, because it's an easy vote winner. You know, if you're trying to convince people who are hard done by that there's someone below them that is causing them to be more hard done by when it's actually people at the top, people are going to believe it. George Osborne, the Chancellor in the early years of the coalition government, sort of presented this idea of, imagine you've come home from a long day at work, you've been working hard, you're looking at your next door neighbour who's on welfare, living life of Riley. No one on welfare is living the life of Riley, let's be very clear about that. PIP in this country is not enough. In general with universal credit as well. It's designed to keep people in poverty. And,
do you not think that, like, when you travel to other countries, especially when you go to a country, you know, worse off than ours, like, I know this isn't a fair comparison,
of course, no.
like a Thailand or something like that.
Yeah.
Even some European countries, and you see the way that they treat disabled people or people that have got mental health issues out there, you think, bloody hell, like, I'm flipping so happy that I'm English.
Yeah,
I think
it's all subjective, but it's just like the idea that, because they're treated worse there, it doesn't make it any better here. Do you know what I mean?
No, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying as well at the same time that I know things can always be better.
Yeah, for sure.
But there's just so many issues, right?
I mean, if we're going to go through life going, well, look, things could be worse, we're never going to get anywhere, are we?
Facts, but I guess we have to look at the things that are most important.
But it's how do we improve those things? If we want everyone to have a meaningful life and to live a life of dignity, then we have to invoke things.
So I don't even know about. So you're telling me about the whole disability act.
Yeah.
So what kind of things do you think are not in place that should be?
I think it's about, if you're basically the entire approach to welfare in this country now is about getting people into work. And you could argue, fair enough. But the cuts that this government is wanting to implement over the next 4 years to reduce the welfare bill, what we need to understand is the reason the welfare bill in this country is so high is because we have 14 years of a Conservative government that sought to reduce living standards in this country. And as a result, people get ill quicker, they are becoming regularly ill, and they are potentially becoming disabled, which means that they are going to need to claim welfare. So all the cuts to the welfare state, government spending on various things, it's all going to backfire because you're going to end up spending it in other places. That's why means testing is such an awful thing to do. For those listening, do you know what means testing is?
No.
So means testing is basically where you give people only what they need. And it's not a good way of doing it, because if you're barely getting by, you may need more. It's why I believe in universalism. It's like the idea of like free school meals, for example. I believe that every child in this country should get free school meals regardless of their background. Why do I think that? It's the same thing with school uniform. If everyone has it, you can't tell the difference per se. Same with school meals as well. If everybody's receiving it, there's not this case of, oh, my mummy and daddy pay for you to have meals. It's like, well, everyone gets it, so there's no differentiation. And it's about showing that
kids will always find a way to bully each
Of course, for sure.
Don't get it
but
twisted.
you want to reduce that. And I think one of the best ways of reducing stigma is by everyone has it. Imagine if we started means testing the NHS. If you earn below a certain amount, or you got to start paying towards your healthcare. I mean, technically we do in the form of taxation. But if we started having it, it was like, right, you got to start tapping your card, go along. But if you earn less, that's going to create resentment towards people who are earning less.
Yeah.
So it's about basically saying, we're a society, we look after one another, and that's how I see us going about it.
Okay, cool. Another couple of reasons why I think Kamala, as Trump says, did not win, is and I know you're going to say the right and the left are constantly throwing shots at each other, but I think the comparison to Hitler's a bit far. Especially when he's already been in power, and yes, there was insurrection, shouldn't have happened, it was planned, but outside of that, you can't compare him to Hitler.
No,
I think
can't. But
let's
not forget that his vice presidential pick, the vice president elect, called him America's Hitler.
True.
So,
but then that could just be a bitter old employee.
I think we could do that, but if you look at the way populist figures behave, and I think you don't want to really start making Hitler comparisons because you can't really go. Where do you go from there? But populism relies on a scapegoat, right? So who did Trump scapegoat? He scapegoats immigrants, Muslims, women to a certain extent later on. You've got to forget, the first time he announced his bid for presidency back in 2015, he called Mexicans killers and rapists. He just straight up called them that. That is a form of scapegoating.
That was crazy.
There's a reason that hate crimes went up during the Trump presidency, because people felt emboldened to hold those beliefs.
But I would say now the typical Trump supporter, or I don't want to say the typical, forget typical, but the people that voted Trump, I feel personally, are very different.
For sure. I mean, this is the thing. Like we tell ourselves, like, oh, I don't. So I'll give you an example. Like during Brexit, for example, after the vote, I remember when people would be talking about it and they would be around my family and they knew full well that we weren't fully English. And when they were talking about, oh, I voted Brexit because of immigration, but I don't mean your dad. And it's like, why do you need to specify that? And it's about basically people trying to absolve themselves of any of the negative reception around figures like your Trumps, your Farages, your Boris Johnsons. And I think, you know what, like, I think it's perfectly normal to have concerns about immigration. But I think it depends on it's perfectly normal to have concerns around immigration. Because everyone does. But I would say it's like in terms of what aspect. So if your concern is about housing, say in this country, for example, build more housing, because there's a housing crisis in this country. That's not the fault of immigration. When you've had successive governments that haven't built enough social housing in this country, and there is a shortage of stock, where I live in Milton Keynes, 71% of the rented properties I'll talk about, actually, Right to Buy. Are you familiar with the scheme?
Right to Buy.
Right to Buy. So Right to Buy was introduced under Thatcher in the 80s, and the idea is that if you lived in a council house for a number of years, you could buy it off the council for a discounted rate. Cool. Okay. Home ownership, great. Everyone wants to own their own home.
Yeah.
Problem is that as housing stock was being sold off, it was not being replaced at the same rates because there was no financial incentive for councils to build more housing. Because if you're building a house for X amount of pounds and then you're selling it for a discount, where's the money? Where's the profit? So essentially, they weren't incentivized to build housing, which meant that it largely falled upon sort of property developers, yada yada yada. People who were buying former right to buy homes, then renting them out. So where I live in Milton Keynes, 71% of rented properties are former right to buy homes. So it creates this this cycle where people are being trapped in the private rental market, which is absolutely extortionate. Rent in this country is absolutely atrocious. Average rent, I think, at the moment is about £1,300. It's not affordable in the slightest, and because there's not enough houses, people are struggling. And if you're someone who's trying to get on the property ladder and you can't do it for whatever reason, and then when you're told, well, the reason you can't get on there is because of immigration, I understand why people I understand why people would run with that. But it's really not the case. The solution for me is to build more. Everyone wants a home. Everyone should have a home. It's a recognised human right by the UN. Yeah, build it. Just build.
So yeah, there's two parts to that. Since I know you're more into UK politics, I'll switch to that side. I think the whole Brexit thing, I personally, at the time anyway, being way more liberal than I am now, but I generally just thought, I was obviously Brexit in, I want us to stay within. I didn't see a problem with, people complain about immigrants, but they were just doing a lot of jobs better than British people.
When I say that, it's just like people just wanted to do those jobs.
They were happy to do the jobs that British people didn't want to do.
Yeah.
There's so many jobs in this country.
Yeah.
There are so many jobs. And it's just people didn't want to do them. And that's what really annoys me about people that voted Brexit out. I think, for me, personally, I thought at the time there's a lot of xenophobic behaviour.
Oh,
I think
100%.
people's internal racist views that they don't think they actually hold, that they do hold.
It's unconscious bias.
Yeah.
It's what you learn about when you do teach training. You learn this idea of unconscious bias.
Yeah.
And we all have it. We're all guilty of it. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just about when it's picked up upon that you act upon it, and you go about figuring out why you hold those beliefs and why you behave in a certain way.
Yeah, and I feel like that just brought a lot of that out.
Yeah.
And obviously we know we're not any better off for it anyway.
Yeah.
But I think the alarming thing, what I would say, is just the amount, right? So wasn't it last year when I looked into this, 1 million people
Coming for net migration figures?
Yeah. And I think our migration process is really lackluster.
Are you looking at small boat crossings, or are you just looking at people coming over?
So people
in general.
People coming over in general.
In general, yeah, net migration is always going to be going up. The thing is, we've had successive government, like the last Conservative government, every year they said we're going to reduce net migration. Net migration went up year on year on year because they acknowledge that immigration is needed in this country. When our birth rate is falling, and we have an aging population, we need new people to enter the workforce, and it's a very sort of capitalist way of looking at it.
Yeah.
But it's basically treating people like livestock, really. Like, right, you replace those people, and that's the way it's going. So unless we have a government that incentivizes people to
have babies,
basically shack. If we're going to be honest. And the way that you do that is by making housing more affordable, making it easier to raise a family by making childcare cheaper, and you increase maternity pay. And that's how you go about it. You don't go about scapegoating immigrants and blaming them for the ills. The other factor of that is when you get into people who want to spread great replacement theory, which is this idea that people are being imported. Basically, the idea that the white indigenous population is going. You see it in America as well. This idea that the white indigenous population is going to slowly become a minority.
Yeah.
Now, what I always say to those people is, first of all, that's never going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Second of all, why are you scared about becoming a minority? Because minorities aren't treated differently, right? As some of these people might say. Yeah. So it is a case of what are you concerned about? And I think it's very telling about who they're concerned about sort of coming over, because I'm not fully British. No one's ever been concerned about my foreign heritage. But perhaps if my family were from Nigeria, or somewhere else, then perhaps there might be a few different issues. Perhaps if I looked not British, and I put that in air quotes for people who are listening, because what does a British person look like?
But I also feel like, and this is a topic in itself, and we'll discuss this later, but I think what we've got to recognise, and a lot of people don't unless they're young and they are dating, I feel like the dating market has completely changed. And this is something that people don't really want to touch on, but I think now that obviously women don't depend. Obviously, there's feminism and there's the extreme sides of feminism, where men kind of feel like they don't really have a voice anymore. Women, obviously, it's great that women have obviously come to the workforce. Actually, now I'll earn men in their 20s if they don't have a baby, which is crazy, and it shows how far that they've come in such a short amount of time. But a lot of women won't even look at a lot of men nowadays.
Really?
A lot of women. I can stat.
Does that
give you stats on this.
Is that something that you're personally finding, or is it just
no?
Okay.
But I care about it because I don't think it's right.
But in terms of then that says
And
that probably says more about a bloke than it does about the woman, if you know what I mean.
No, I don't think so. I agree.
Really, it's like-
I think it's 50-50.
But also, it's like if someone doesn't want to be with you, someone doesn't want to be with you.
Yeah, but mate, I feel like a lot of the time, if a girl doesn't think, a girl thinks she's settling because the guy earns the same amount of money as her, or he doesn't earn, I'm not trying to say this is all women, but he doesn't earn 100 grand, he's not 6 foot, which is becoming more and more and more of a thing. I think.
Yeah, but I mean, the average wage in this country at the moment is
30
like
grand.
37 grand.
Yeah, I thought
Yeah.
it was less than that. I thought it was like 34.
Yeah, 34 or 37.
Yeah.
I think by next year it'll be around 37,000.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, I mean, I don't. This is actually the first time I've ever really discussed this.
Yeah.
to
This
be
is
honest.
more. This is
Yeah,
more.
and I would say it's a case of like who, you know, for me it's like I think it just says more about, you know, options are options. Do you know what I mean? You can't force someone to be with someone because unless we're going to get into a point where it's like, right, you are assigned a partner from this age. It's like that's just a bit weird. Do you know what I mean?
That's a bit extreme.
It is extreme, but
I
like,
think it's just. I think it's a bit of a toxic culture that has become more and more of a thing.
but then we have to ask ourselves who's created that culture. This idea of you need to look like this.
This is social media.
You need
A lot of
to look
social
like this. You need to earn this. You need to be doing this. It's like who is telling you to do those things, and do you really need to be doing those things? The role models I've had in my life, who were men, were men that I worked with when I was a teenager, when I was in my early teens, was in my late teens, sorry, and who were doing the same job as me. They've been doing it for years. They'd been, say, in the police. They had been working in landscaping jobs. These were very much like men who were never going to be earning large amounts of money, but they had a loving family, they had a loving partner, they had amazing children, and they were very secure in themselves. They were very sure of themselves as men. They weren't exerting themselves in a way that would make people feel uncomfortable. And that was, for me, part of the way that I shaped myself, because I saw them as being very likable people who wanted to be in they very likable people who who basically they were good people, and fundamentally that was what people acknowledged. And I think if you're like that, if you're a cool person, and the right person is going to come along. And
Appreciate
it doesn't say anything about you. I suppose I kind of contradict myself now, but like you can't expect people to be with you just because, like, you know, you're feeling a little bit lonely.
We'll dig into this straight after the break. So many questions to ask you. All right, let's go on to TikTok. We'll get back into all the politics in a bit, but let's go on to TikTok for a little bit. Lighten things up a little bit.
This has been a very light conversation. I very much enjoyed it.
Oh, perfect. All right, thank you for coming. It's been a great conversation. What inspired you to start TikTok?
So I was in my second year of university. I was studying during the pandemic at De Montfort, and we were doing we had to do a module called Politics and Action. Traditionally, what you would have done, you would have gone out into the wider community, worked as a local authority, like a council, maybe a homeless shelter, maybe a school, maybe not school, but you would have engaged with politics in the wider community. Because of the pandemic and because Leicester was under different tiers of restrictions to the rest of the country, couldn't even go and get a pint of milk at times. That's how it felt. And so they said, you know what, you can do social media if you like. And I thought, well, I've got this TikTok account, and I figured I might as well do that. So I just started making TikToks for uni for this project. It got to the end of the project in May, and I think at the time I had maybe 10,000 followers. And I thought, oh, this is actually going quite well. I think I'm going to continue it. And that was in 2021. I started it in October 2022 properly. May 2021, I had 10,000 by the time I finished. I only got a second class for that thing though, that assignment, which really annoyed me because I put my whole bussy into it. I couldn't think what to say, but I put my all into it, and they only gave me a 2-2, and then the uni asked me if they could showcase it, and I went, no, if you bump up to a first, maybe, but they didn't. But yeah, I continued it, and now I'm on, I want to say like 188,000. I think something like that. But yeah, it's just gone from different levels.
I need to get my TikTok.
I don't even know. The thing is, when people say like, how do you do it? I don't know what advice to give. I think I just post consistently, and also like because I covered current affairs, right? So if people were interested in what was going on and they went on TikTok and searched, I don't know, Boris Johnson, and I was talking about Boris Johnson, TikTok would pick up and they go, oh, you're interested in learning about this? Here, watch this. And before you know it, that's where it came from. So for me, because I was covering current affairs, I think it was quite easy to build a platform in that sense. Perhaps if I was talking about more generic issues, people wouldn't necessarily pick up on it.
Yeah, you just don't pick up on it.
It's all about like being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, and I feel like having a kind of like a USP, something unique.
Yeah,
a unique niche, basically.
Yeah, for sure.
I think
My stuff is very niche. I sometimes, because I'm a big football fan, so I do sometimes look at politics within football.
Yeah.
And when there's like certain high profile cases going on, like my video today is about, I don't know if you saw, this guy had been sentenced to like 3 years in prison for selling dodgy fire sticks. And sort of looking at it, goes, well, the reason that people are buying fire sticks is because your services are completely unaffordable. When you look at like the prices like Sky, TNT Sports,
and they're
Amazon Prime
comparing it
as
to
well.
that. They're comparing that to that. The guy that got done for
Hugh Edwards.
When
you look at when there's like nonces in this country that aren't even going to prison, and for like
videos.
holding like awful images on their
porn.
phone, and they don't spend a day in prison, and yet you have somebody who made it easier to watch 3 p.m. kickoffs spending 3 years in prison. How is that fair? Also, when you look at the Premier League as well, the fact that they never release statements on the blatant sport washing that's going on with the likes of City and Newcastle, the fact that there are rapists within the league, Thomas Partey most notably, other figures as well.
This is what annoys me.
And
I'm glad you touched on that.
They will never. The thing is, the Premier League will never release a statement on it saying, we are strongly condemn anything that's going on. There's an investigation. They won't say
Partey
anything.
got away with it. Like, no one ever spoke about it. He got booed, and the worst thing is, he got booed, and still they would not mention it.
Yeah.
And Greenwood, fairly, he got ostracised. But I mean, I'm a United fan.
Greenwood.
But
the thing with Greenwood though, that was the case where like you had the audio, you had the photos, and still United were figuring out how they were going to phase him back into the team. And even what does that say? Manchester United, love them or loathe them, personally loathe them, Liverpool fan. They are one of the most recognisable football clubs on the planet, and they will have a fan base from all backgrounds. What does that say to women in particular about how they respect them?
But we did do the right thing.
But you sold it for a profit, mate. You sold it for a profit.
We sold him. There's other players in the league. I'm not gonna have this about United when there's other players in the league that have done.
But the idea, we got rid of our rapist. But like, but you still made money on it. You still made money.
At least he's not playing for our club.
Yeah, if there was any sense of like, we don't want him to, you would have released him from contract instead of like loaning him out to Getafe, getting him to build up a profile for himself again, and then going to Marseille, and then selling for what, 35 million? If there was any to me personally, the fact that the club was still trying to figure out a way to benefit themselves from that situation. I understand that they're a business; they want to make money, but you can make money in different ways. You don't need to go selling.
Sometimes the law works against you. Sometimes it goes against you.
Yeah,
it works in your favour. For him, he got extremely lucky. Let's admit. So,
I mean, basically, the reason the case never went through was because key witnesses withdrew their evidence.
Yeah,
so they couldn't prosecute him. But in terms of those cases, in terms of evidence, is probably the best you can get in that situation. In terms of the public seeing it, and the fact that he has built a fan base off of people who, because of that. When you look on the internet, for example, if you look on like football Twitter, for example, which is an absolute cesspit, so when you look on Twitter and you see like people who are supporting him, showing solidarity, and it's just weird. Like why do you want to support someone like that? And again, with like the whole Thomas Partey situation, the fact that he still plays, like how come whenever Spain had to go play, whenever Arsenal had to go play in Spain, he's suddenly injured? Like let riddle me that.
I haven't even clocked on.
And the reason that he has not been prosecuted in this country was because the law surrounding you could be prosecuted for crimes that happened overseas. It changed just before it changed like after he had done that crime, and then committed it again just last year. I've seen it again. It's in 2022 and 2023. And this is the thing: if you don't crack down on people like that, they're always going to reoffend.
Don't get me wrong. I am definitely kind of like innocently proven guilty to an extent. Like, I don't just believe any story, and I'm not a believe all women, because I think men lie and women lie.
But when you look at the prosecution rate for rape and sexual assault in this country, it's 3%. So
I understand that, mate, but you can't just say, and mate, I'll 100% say this, and I'm a lad that goes out a lot, and I've seen girls, whatever. So I've been in a party environment a lot in my life. You can't just say believe all women because they're women, because that is ridiculous.
But again,
And
when you
people do lie. I've seen
but
girls
when you-
lie about a lot of stuff.
Of course there will be exceptions, but when you look, I'll always point to the prosecution rate. If people are looking for justice, the idea that they would go through the deeply invasive process that is a rape and sexual assault trial, because what you have to remember is the defence are going to try and present the accuser in a completely negative light.
Awful, yeah.
They will bring up, what were you wearing? Why are you behaving like this? And they will do all of that in order to cast any doubt whatsoever in order to get their client free. Now, obviously, you can say, well, they're the lawyer, that's what they've got to do. But at the same time, it's like
I completely agree with you on
Yeah.
this, and I think the whole judicial system is warped,
Yeah.
in my opinion. As we just spoke about, how
Yeah.
can Hugh Edwards, whatever his name is, get the same as the guy that's in the fire system? I
Yeah.
completely agree with you.
Yeah.
However, we can't just do this whole believe all women, because you're going to get more and more and more lies. People lie about things to keep themselves in a relationship. People lie about things because of assault. Yes, people lie about things all the time, and that's men and women. It's not a women thing. Men and women lie.
But again, that's on them, and it's a very small amount. And again,
I
what
don't
I'm saying,
think it is a small
but,
amount.
No, but again, what I'm saying is like, again, I'm going to put it back to the prosecution rate, because if you're looking for justice, going through that deeply invasive process, you know, people don't take that decision lightly. Sorry, they know full well what is going to happen, and even if they even get it to trial, because sometimes there won't be enough evidence to deal with these sort of cases.
Agreed.
So it is a minefield, and there definitely needs to be reforms. And one of the things I am hoping with this current government is that they do go about that in terms of dealing with violence against women and girls. Because we've seen so many high-profile cases in this country in recent years. Sabina Nessa, Sarah Everard. And reforms do need to take place. And I just think it's about having sort of frank, honest conversations like we're having now in other places as well. And it's just about making sure that everyone feels comfortable and that everyone feels safe.
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, I just think like I completely agree that we need to do more. I think we need to do more as men to protect women in general. If we see things that seem off, let's say on a night out or whatnot, go and do what I see as a manly thing and protect the girl. But also I do think that there is a lot of like, we can't just have it just like completely lax where we just believe in women about everything, because then I think a lot of women just take the law into their own hand.
But then looking at how
I hear what you're
but
saying.
looking at how women are treated when they come out with these sort of things where they're accused of doing it for clout.
Because there's a lot of people that
etc.,
lie. There's
money.
a lot of people that lie, mate. And there's a lot of women. There's a lot of women that even come out on these podcasts and they even admit to it. They're like, "Yeah, I was lying about that." Oh, there was a.
Well, then they're a despicable individual. But
But people will do a lot for clout. Clouts become more of a drug now.
What clout do you gain from saying that you were assaulted and raped?
Mate, there was literally a woman.
Seriously,
right?
what clout do you actually gain? A
Okay,
lot of the time,
cool. I know a lot of people because I've done a few little TV bits and stuff when I was younger and whatnot. I know people that have done a lot of TV shows and stuff.
Right.
The stories that they will sell the press about themselves that are disgusting about them even to get their name in their name in the papers.
Like who?
Like drinking on their pregnancy, like acting like they're having a kid when they're not.
Right.
Yeah, like
But that's
false
not.
abortions and
But that's
whatnot.
not about R and SA, is it? That's just about other. That's like about.
Okay.
That's something about completely different stuff, isn't
Bro,
it?
you can see it. You can see it online all the time. People going onto podcasts, and there was a woman, for example. She was on Adam 22's podcast,
Right.
and
Who's that?
Adam 22.
I don't know who that is.
He's like a kind of like a hip hop podcast commentator.
Right.
He's now turned into a porn star.
Right. Okay.
All sorts.
Yeah.
And there's a woman on there that lied about her like baby daddy like abusing her sexually and physically, sexually, all of this kind of stuff.
Okay.
Trying to drag him through the mud, and then she admitted to lying about it.
Right.
But you see that a lot online.
Right.
I'm not trying to say that's.
But again, I
That's
think.
not
But
every
again,
single
I think
case,
if
but I
that's
think
the,
people
but again, I
will do
think
a lot
if
for
that's the
clout.
if that's like the type of content you consume,
I don't
then it's good.
consume that kind of
Okay, but if someone does, that's you're gonna think the number's bigger. It's like if you keep reading.
I hear
It's
that.
like if you keep reading in papers like immigrant has committed crime. Immigrant has, and that's all you see in the papers. You may start to think that actually this is a massive issue, when actually when you look at the numbers, actually that's not really the case.
Being around. Okay, personally,
Yeah.
for me, being going to party islands and whatnot, I've seen girls over exaggerate situations in the past, and I've been like, but was he really that creepy? Because I saw you necking on me. You'd be like,
But then
yeah, maybe I'm being a bit over the top.
Consent can be withdrawn at any time, no?
What do you mean?
Well, let's say like if you're interacting with someone and it's getting a bit flirtatious, and they may get to the point where it's actually, you know what, I'm not very comfortable doing this anymore. You can withdraw consent. Consent can be withdrawn at any time.
100%. But
Yeah.
if I feel like for me, you should. If you don't want to do something, I think you should voice it.
Yeah, but then
I don't think it's a case of like. I know they were trying to relax the law and whatnot a few years ago, but like women saying that they felt that they were fine with it at the start, and then they weren't comfortable with it, but they didn't say anything. It's like the guy's not just
because women feel scared about voicing that sort of thing because what can happen?
Yeah, but you have to say something. And like
Yeah,
I'm sure
course,
even as guys, this is something that I want to touch on. Guys also feel the same. There's times where you don't want to perform, and it might be your missus, it might be a girl, but you just go ahead with it anyway. If you don't voice it, you can't moan and complain about it.
Well,
It's a bigger issue.
Not necessarily. If you don't want to do something, then just don't. The way I see it is
Just
if I don't want to do something, don't do it. If I've been in situations where can we talk about drug taking?
Yeah.
Okay. There were times when I was at university,
Yes.
and it'd be like actually I remember the first time I ever smoked weed when I was 16 years old, and I didn't really want to do it.
Yeah.
But the people that I was friends with at the time, they were all doing it,
Yeah.
and I felt pressured to do
We've all
it.
been there.
And I literally remember this guy making my mouth like that and putting the zoo in my mouth,
Weird.
telling me to blow.
Weird.
And it's so weird. And it's something I haven't even thought about.
Many
This was like 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And it still stays with me, and I remember it, and I was just like, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel comfortable enough voicing it there, so I understand why people in the various different situations don't feel comfortable voicing something, because they don't know what's going to happen to them.
But is this not a bigger? Okay, this is maybe a bigger problem then. So I feel like this kind of thing.
Yeah.
It feels like we have such a big binge drinking kind of culture in the UK, right? We all go on nights out. We all have quite a few drinks.
Yeah.
Things are gonna happen when you're intoxicated.
Yeah.
So is this not kind of like a wider issue? Because
For sure, it's a multifaceted issue, but I don't think we can attribute it solely to something like alcohol, for example. Everyone drinks. Like, the worst I've ever been was, I ended up in an ambulance, and it was awful. I hated it, but God bless St John's Ambulance. They looked after me really good. We've all been in those situations, but I think if we start blaming things like alcohol, it kind of absolves people of any sort of wrongdoing.
I'm not blaming people.
Yeah,
I'm not blaming.
okay,
I'm
yeah,
saying
yeah.
most of these incidents would probably happen with alcohol involved. If we're being honest.
Of course, but if we were,
Usually a night out, hook up with someone,
people get, I don't know, people get assaulted when people are sober. People that can happen. So by simply looking at something like alcohol, it's still going to happen. Around the world, in countries where alcohol is banned, people still get assaulted, don't they?
100%, but that would be way more intentional, right?
But
coming from more your worldview, not mine.
Yeah.
From your worldview, if someone is drunk, they might, although someone doesn't voice it, they might not be able to see some of those telltale signs.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And that's when it becomes a wider conversation.
Yeah, for sure, and that's why people need to. I think they need to sort of sit down, but also reflect on your own behaviour.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's times where I've been on nights out when I where maybe I made people feel uncomfortable, not intentionally.
Yeah.
It may just be that I'm kind of something I've always found is because I'm quite tall. Where sometimes I've been close to someone, it can sometimes feel like a very invasive thing. And I don't mean it intentionally. It's just like maybe I put my arm around someone and I've been a bit like, that was maybe a little bit weird. And that's about just reflecting on yourself, doing a self-examination, saying, you know what, I need to change this about myself. I need to do this, and I need to look at why maybe I'm doing those sorts of things. It's just about saying
when you're a black man in this country. I'm not saying it's all bad.
No.
Yeah, it's more good than bad, but I think you have to be very kind of like aware of yourself.
Oh yeah, for sure. There would
especially as a guy that goes to the gym, you have to be aware.
Well, this is the thing. I remember my mother sitting me down once it became clear that I was getting that I was starting to really grow. She said, "Look, throughout life, look, when you go through life, you may find there are points where women may feel uncomfortable when you're walking towards them.
Wow.
And that says nothing about you. That's just the way that they think and feel. So but there are things that you can do to make yourself not look as threatening. So for example, like let's say crossing the street. Sometimes if I'm walking the dog, right, and there's people approach me, let's say it's dark, I'll be talking to the dog, making it very clear. Or let's say I'm walking behind someone, I'll speed up and walk past, or I'll cross the road, I'll do something a little bit different. And it's just those little things that you can do in order to make people feel a little bit safer. That's what I was told. And you know what? It never came from an accusatory place. It was just like, look, these are the cars that you've been dealt with, and here's how you can work around them.
I hear that. I think that's good of you. I mean, for me, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't cross the road as such, but I just try not to look. Just keep yourself to yourself.
Yeah.
Try and not obviously look intimidating in any sense, and just be aware. I completely agree with that. I can back that. I can back that. Cool. So we were talking just before about men. So you think it's more men's problem when it comes to struggling to date? So date. So
right. In terms of that sort of stuff.
to just give you some stats.
Yeah.
So Tinder did a study, and 50% of men swipe right.
Yeah.
It's 55% swipe on average swipe right. So good-looking men to not so attractive men, on average 55%. 5% of women swipe right. 80% of, I think it's a Hello Keeper study. 80% of women only find 20% of men attractive. They find 80% of men unattractive. So
what's the metric for finding them attractive? Is it like swiping right?
They did a survey.
Okay, right.
So,
well, I think what we have to remember about dating apps is that there's going to be more men on them than women.
Facts.
And also what we also have to consider is that the way that these things do work nowadays is that meeting a partner online does tend to be quite a common thing.
the most successful way.
And it's into like traditional ways of meeting a partner, maybe meeting them in a bar or in a club. They're not accessible, maybe because clubbing is ridiculously expensive these days. Going out, you can't do that as regular. Working environments as well. I think workplace relationships are something that is frowned upon in some sort of areas. So it's something that is discouraged. So sometimes meeting someone online is the way to go about it. It's also, in terms of meeting someone, it can be kind of safe because if if that person's maybe a bit weird, you can block them. But maybe other issues arise as a result of that. I would say again, it's just like with the sphere. It's like let's say the only way I can think of it is like, let's say there's like a crate of apples. There's like 20 apples in a crate, and there's 11 of you. 9 people aren't going to get an apple, right? And so it's about that sort of rush. That's kind of a bit of an animalistic way of looking at it, I suppose. I couldn't figure out a way to talk about it, but it's just kind of like...
Let me chuck this at you, right? So bear in mind there's more women anyway, in general.
Yeah.
There's more women. I think a lot of it's kind of like ideology of not settling, focusing on the family at a later date, that's all fine. Women still focusing on business. Women becoming a lot more successful. Me personally, I think that women are hypogamous in the sense that they want to date somebody their same socioeconomic status or finance level, the same or higher. Nothing wrong with that at all.
Yeah.
Men have obviously fallen behind big time on that, and that's why I do agree with you that it is on men, probably more than 50%, to pull their finger out and actually do more. If you want to date a specific type of woman, you know what you have to do. There's so many.
But we also need to ask ourselves, like, if you are the way that you are and you're content and happy in yourself, why would you change yourself in order to let's say if you're a down to earth stand up chap.
Yeah.
If
they're struggling to date, mate. That's the problem.
If you're struggling to date, like the right person will inevitably come along.
No, this is
Bro,
not
it
true.
will,
This is the problem. This is the problem.
It will,
We can go
it
back
will.
and forth with this all day.
No,
There's a lot
will.
of men. There's a lot of men, mate. There's a lot of men that you don't realise how hard it is for men to date, right? There's another study that was done. It was from Tinder, and it showed that the average looking man, not the worst looking man, the average looking man, it takes them 1,000 swipes to get one date, and that's not 1,000 swipes to get how many matches.
But what are we
to
dealing
actually
like?
get
It's
a
like
date.
the average looking man.
That's what they say.
But the thing is, like beauty, all that stuff, it's all subjective. what you could, what you know,
It's not.
what you may consider to be beautiful may differ to
I
me,
don't think so.
and it may differ to somebody
I don't
else.
think so.
We all may have an idea of what we consider someone to.
I think there's a general consensus. Yeah, we might think someone's slightly more attractive or not, but pretty's usually pretty, and someone that's unattractive, generally speaking, is usually
Yeah, but what I would again say with that is like if you're on Tinder or Hinge is another one, isn't it?
yeah, Hinges are
If you're just there going, swipe, 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 what are you doing? Like no composure in front of goal. Just relax. Just be yourself. Learn to sit back and observe is what I would say.
But I think
your time will come, and you shouldn't be changing yourselves. But this is what we do. It can make people men be resentful of women.
100%.
And it's kind of like, well, you don't have to be like, you are not owed a woman.
No, of course not. But you can. Let's admit, because I would say to my coaching service, if someone wants to be mentored, there are things you can do that makes you more desirable.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Yeah, I completely agree with you. Don't change yourself. If you're into geeky Star Wars comics, stay into Star Wars comics.
Yeah,
but
I am definitely for sure.
Do you know what I mean? It's not to do
never,
with like changing your core.
It's never hurt me. That's all I can say. I've never.
That's just an example.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, it's more about if there is something that you could do, like improve your hygiene. You want to start getting fit, going to the gym.
It's beneficial to yourself.
Yeah, going to the gym. It could be going to the gym. It could be you feel crap about yourself in general. You hate the job that you're in. Okay, if you looked at what else you can do with your skill set.
I mean, I'll give you an example. A recent example is yesterday. I was doing a video.
Yeah.
And I looked at myself in the camera and I thought, I fucking hate the way I look.
Nope. Language.
And I was like, sorry. And I looked at myself. I hate the way that I look. That's the first time I've ever had that.
Wow.
And I think it was more because my under jaw, it looked a little bit lower on camera, so it looked like I didn't have a jaw.
Mm-hmm.
And I do. But it was kind of the point where it's like, oh, I really don't like the way that I look. And I found myself, it was the first time I ever felt like deeply insecure about it. And I thought, what do I do? And I was like, shit, maybe I should, like, my diet is it's not awful, but I don't eat that much.
Mm-hmm.
I drink a ridiculous amount of coffee, alcohol. I smoke as well, which is really bad. Don't smoke. I thought, what am I going to do? And I thought, you know what? I'll go for a run. I'll run around my village. And I did that. And I came back and I felt so much better about myself. Just doing that. And it was just that little thing. And I just thought, you know what? I feel better. And I didn't blame anyone else.
Yeah.
I didn't say, oh, I feel this way. There is probably part of it because I'm self-conscious about what people might say online. So there is that aspect for sure. And that's something I need to deal with.
Yeah.
But I thought, you know what? I'm going to do this. And I felt so much better about myself. And maybe I probably won't do it again tonight because I'm going to the pub later. So, I'll do it Friday morning or something like that.
But that's what I'm trying to say to you. So that's where, when you're saying, oh, you shouldn't change yourself as a person, I'm not saying you should change yourself as a person, but as you just said, oh, okay, my diet could be a bit better. It's just about doing those things that you know internally.
Like I don't think any like I mean do I think that a woman is going to find you more attractive? You go like, yeah, I'm eating like 5 meals a day. Then I'm like, oh, cool, all right, so you got pretty well stocked fridge.
No, but we should find you more attractive. If you're a single guy and you're struggling, let's say you're overweight and whatnot, you need to go to the gym, you need to be a bit more fit. And let's say you completely change your body composition within a year, are women are going to find you more attractive? Yes. It's not about the 5 meals a day is the small steps to get you through to that bigger goal.
But I think it's also just about just if you're secure in yourself, other people will feel secure in you.
Boom! We are back for the last quarter, and we're just saying how quickly it's gone.
It definitely does.
It goes way too quickly. It's annoying, actually. I wish it was on longer, but it is what it is. So, DEI.
Yeah.
What are your views?
Diversity, equality, and inclusion.
Yeah.
I think it's integral as a teacher. It's something that you have to touch upon. It's something that you have to learn about.
Mm-hmm.
The whole idea is about making your students feel comfortable. As a teacher, that is my job first and foremost, the safeguarding and protection of my students. If they are in a lesson and they feel they need to be as comfortable as possible in order to learn, and if that means that they want to be referred to in a certain way, whether that be their name, maybe in the third person with pronouns, or they want me to be aware of maybe say they've got learning difficulties, for example, maybe their home background, and that's stuff that they feel that I need to learn, I need to know in order to help them throughout their education.
So
who am I saying?
I should reframe that because I agree with all those
things.
You're talking about more from a t-shirt perspective, which I completely get.
But that's really
I mean
helpful.
from like pushing, let's say, a community that may have been marginalised at a moment over the last 100 years, pushing them into certain job roles. So a job role specifically for women. Or
Well, that's like something like positive discrimination, affirmative action, that sort of
affirmative
thing.
action, yeah.
It's a weird one, isn't it? Because, you know, the idea that under Tony Blair's governance of the Labour Party, he introduced something called all women shortlists, which the idea is that if a constituency wanted a bigger candidate for their seat, it had to be it basically had to be all women, because they wanted to increase the number of women MPs in Parliament. The Conservatives did something similar in the run-up to the 2010 election under David Cameron, where they basically had a list of 100 candidates, and they were a mix of people who were women, disabled, black, brown, etc. And the idea was that they wanted to basically change the image of their party, because the Conservative Party, for example, didn't want to be seen as the party for old, dry, dusty white men, and the Labour Party wanted to seem more progressive, because the Labour Party's never actually had a woman leader.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is kind of the flip side of it, really, where it's like, you know, you want more people from those backgrounds in positions of power, like in Parliament, for example. But then the flip side of it is saying, well, the only way that they can get in is if they compete from people from also the only way they can get in is if they're going up against people from their protected characteristic. When realistically, that would never really happen in real life. For example, if you go for a job, you and me both go for a job, you know, they'll pick who's the best candidate. Of course, there are other things that they have to consider. It's like why a lot of job places will hire university blind, so they look at your classification, not where it comes from. My 2-1 from De Montfort University is not going to look as good as, say, a 2-1 from Oxford. Yeah. That's just the reality. That's just the way that it works. Yeah. So I think those sort of things are definitely good for sure. But in terms of like all women shortlists, those sort of things that the Conservatives did, it's what I find very interesting about the Tories, when they try hammer this home of like, you know, Labour doing DEI and all this nonsense. Like, you guys did the same thing. The reason you are where you are is because you were on that shortlist, and that says nothing about you. That just says about what they've done. But don't then try and discredit something because the only reason you're there is because of that.
Okay, so my views is, as a black man, I don't think you should get a job over somebody else because you're a woman, because you are an ethnic minority. I don't believe in that at all. I think we believe in us women, I believe in black people enough to get a job off their own merit.
100%.
When I've seen this be debated, I'd love to debate someone that's got strong views on this, because I agree that you shouldn't get a job based on your skin colour and whatnot, but then I also think they miss out on the fact that the things that they moan about, you know, there's so many black people in our adverts, there's so many, and it's just like, mate, that's where black people have always thrived. In the music industry, on your TV series.
But also, it's like, so no, there's sort of like this discourse around, isn't it like this Boots advert that there's all this sort of, I've vaguely seen it, like there's all sorts of annoyance and anger over this advert that Boots have done for Christmas. It's a Christmas advert.
Yeah,
you know,
people
does it
about
matter that Mrs. Claus is played by a black woman? Does it matter that the elves, fictional characters I should add, are played by people who are trans or non-binary? Does that stuff matter? No, it doesn't. It's a Christmas advert, and at the end of the day, that they've made a creative decision. If you don't like it, you don't like it. Sure, we've all got favourite adverts, but then I also think there's too many hours in the day for us to be focusing. There's not enough hours in the day for us to be focusing on that sort of stuff.
Agreed. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, some things I completely get. Like, I'm not mad as a black person. I think it's silly that they went and had someone like Idris Elba as James Bond, because I just think he fits it. But yeah, so I think just like a complete roadman black guy should play James Bond. No, it doesn't fit. Do I think a woman should play James Bond? There's not a need to change everything. No, I don't agree with this whole kind of like woke ideology. And we need to change everything, but I agree with you.
What do you mean by woke?
You know exactly what I mean by
woke.
But
can you define woke?
I mean, woke to me, or my definition of woke is just moaning about everything.
But do you know what the correct definition is?
No.
The correct definition derives from African American vernacular English, and it means originally meant to be aware to racial discrimination within society. So that's where it came from, like the development of the civil rights movement.
But that's been hijacked.
Well, no, not necessarily. What's happened, and then later in the 2010s, it came to broadly encompass a wider awareness of different bigotries, so homophobia, misogyny,
Me too,
all that sort of stuff. What's happened is, over the last 4 years, particularly in the wake of the resurgence of the BLM movement, after George Floyd was murdered, was where people would describe anything they didn't like as being woke. The idea, you know, if a black person was on TV, they couldn't rationally explain why they didn't like it. But if they called it woke, and it's basically become an insult rather than by the correct meaning. If you acknowledge that there's discrimination within our society and you want to get rid of it, you are by the correct definition woke. And there's nothing wrong with that. Because to me, woke just means...
Yeah, but that's been hijacked, mate. I don't think
it's been hijacked, so you don't need to... You don't need to partake in the hijacking, do you? Do you know what I mean?
What do you mean?
Well, like, if you're...
I'm pretty much... The beauty, right, I'll tell you this. The beauty of being in the middle about most things is you can call out the left being idiots and you can call out the right for being idiots. So there's going to be things that I think are... They're moaning about something... Like the whole DI argument. I gave you two sides of the coin, right? As a black person, I don't think you should be... You know, then I also think the other side. I think there's too many people moaning about insignificant things.
Yeah, but your definition of woke, with the greatest respect, isn't correct.
Okay, wow.
So,
the average person. Okay, cool. But then, as
but
maybe more
and
more of an intellectual.
Maybe
you're thinking too deep into it.
No, I'm not thinking too deep into it. At the end of the day, there's a definition, and then you go with that.
Okay,
definition.
well that's what's been hijacked, mate, and that's what to the common person. Yeah. Even let's say I'm the common person. Yeah. That's what it means.
That's fine, but that's not what it means.
Okay, you know what I'm on about. So.
Well, but I don't. I understand what you're.
You do. You just want to pick me up at the fact that I haven't got a definition.
No, I'm not.
Right.
But at the end of the day, like, if there's a definition, because what does it serve by me if you go around and you're calling stuff woke when it's not and using that word incorrectly? How does that?
We differ because I'd be like, okay, I can completely understand what you're saying, and then I'd agree or disagree.
But like, who does it serve? So I give an example, right? So, do you speak another language?
I like to think I speak a little Spanish.
Okay, so like, there's probably when you were learning how to speak Spanish or learning, there are probably times where you would say something wrong. Did you appreciate when someone would correct you on how to say it, and then you could because who does it serve if you go around like I give an example like in Dutch, which is my second language. I don't speak it very well. But let's say there were certain things that I would say in Dutch that were not correct because I was translating it directly from English to Dutch. It did not serve me to go around and I would say it and my father would say, no, that's not how you say it. This is how you say it. Because it didn't serve me to go around saying it in an incorrect way, right?
I think that's very relevant to what we're.
No, but it is pretty relevant. If you're going around calling something,
it's at the end of the day, we're focusing on something. We could just debate. Or see each other's point of view based on what we're talking about, as opposed to like defining something. But
that's the whole thing. If we're talking about something,
okay, let me ask you a different question, which you'll prefer. What's your views on cancel culture?
Cancel culture.
Is that one easier for you? You have to do that one.
Cancel culture is a weird one, but essentially, you had people within media, politics, entertainment who were able to get away with doing certain things. So, like, let's say like Little Britain, for example. Most people will like Little Britain. There'll be certain aspects that they like, but with Little Britain, you know, there was blackface. You have Matt Lucas and David Walliams blacking up something that we would have deemed, you know, something that we thought we moved away from, like the black and white minstrel show back in the 1900s. But yeah, here we are in the early 2000s where stuff like that is seen as okay and it's a laugh. Where my family come from in the Netherlands, it is perfectly normal in certain parts of the Netherlands to around Christmas time black up and pretend to be Zwarte Piet. Most people look at that and go, that's racist, and it's not. People call it. It's not.
Let me say one thing: to black people, that's always been racist.
Yeah,
we
sure.
were never laughing at that. I mean, English people were.
Well, this is the thing. Like again with like Zwarte Piet, I was only about 13 years old until I realised how racist it truly was, because that was something I grew up with, and I remember when it was pointed out to me, and I realised how bad it was. I didn't go, I didn't try and defend it because I was like, well, what am I defending? With cancel culture, it's just it's a fancy way of saying someone's being held accountable for something that they've said or done, and there are ways to go about it. So let's say like you make an off-color joke in the staff room, for example, and someone pulls you aside and says, "Just want to let you know, I didn't appreciate saying that, and here's why." That's not you. Could maybe turn around and say, even myself. If I've done a video on something and I've said a certain thing, I said some pretty awful things about Shamima Begum about a year ago, and people called me out over it. I could have very easily turned around and gone, I've been cancelled. They're trying to cancel me. They're saying I can't say this, can't say that. I didn't. Because at the end of the day, who did it serve for me to go around saying things that were not correct? And actually, there was another way of looking at it that was more reflective of the situation.
Okay, but then, yeah, agreed. Okay, what about a comedian then? Comedian that makes jokes on everybody, but then a certain group of people get offended, like Chappelle. Absolutely bans everyone. He bans black people, white people.
Yeah.
Trans, tries to cancel you. Like,
Yeah.
what's your views on that then? I understand what you're trying to say.
Yeah,
but it's
I would
important to hear
say
other people's views.
with trans people, they are, at the moment, there's been a lot of focus on them. They're a very much a marginalised community.
Yeah.
They only make up 0.5% of the population here in this country. And there is so much vitriol and hatred directed towards them simply because they want to live their lives. And I see that. And again, like, jokes are jokes. You can appreciate that. And there are funny trans jokes. There's one that I find funny where it's like, I met someone who I knew at school who had transitioned, and they told me their name, and I'm glad that they did because I'd actually forgotten their last name. So there's that sort of humour there. I think at the end of the day, like, I'm not trans. Maybe it's not my position to say. Perhaps you'd be better off speaking to a trans person about that. I can say, like,
you can talk about things.
Yeah, like for me, like I think if they are consistently, if a certain group is consistently the butt of your jokes, then perhaps you
I
have to.
completely agree on that. I think he banters everybody.
Yeah.
And then he got a lot of stick for that. And I think it's not just that. I completely agree that it must be very difficult being trans. I've never had an issue with trans people. Even though a few people in Ibiza that are trans, actually. We actually got on with very, very well, actually. Yeah. And this is like going back, 10 years ago now?
Yeah.
But I think when people do, I think we've got to look at the reasons why some people do get the backup. And I know you're going to say, oh, it's just because of maybe what they watch and whatnot. But there are, states in the US, like California and whatnot, that are very kind of like pro, like, what's it called? Changing your gender. There's a fancy word for it. At a young age. Yeah, transition at a young age and stuff like that, where I think most people do disagree with things like that.
So when most of the time it's just social transitioning, so it's just like maybe you have your hair longer, you present as being a different gender. Who does that harm? Like, the thing is, everyone goes through, I don't like using the term phases, but the thing is, we all probably went through different phases as kids, and we all did that sort of stuff as teenagers.
But exactly, that's a great point. Think about the amount of girls that the amount of girls that are tomboys.
Yeah.
If we're now going to be a little bit like, oh, okay, like,
even the term
now
tomboy,
you can be a guy, now it's a lot more open, now gender's so much more open. I think it's just a bit like, let them make that decision when they're older. I think that's how most people
But also with, like, the term tomboy, it's just like, what are they doing? They're just the girl that happens to like stuff the boys typically like, and who cares? Who are they harming?
No, you're missing my point.
Okay.
So I mean that if you're going to open the idea of, changing gender at that age, well, maybe, boy, girl,
are people doing that?
There's policies in California and in New York,
right?
Where basically you can, in certain schools and whatnot, you can transition, and you don't have to have any parental.
Well, but then again, that's like a safeguarding thing. So as a teacher, if my student said to me, I see myself as being a boy, for example. I would like you to refer to me by this name, and I would like you to use these pronouns. I, as a teacher, I respect that, and I don't go and tell the parents, because I don't know why. If they haven't come out to their parents, there's probably a good reason as to why that is, and there can be all manner of different reasons. And I, as a teacher, cannot betray the trust of my student because they've confided that in me. I have to tell them that I need to tell pastoral, like a HR, that sort of thing within schools, for sure, because they need to be aware of it. Because if there's like an issue later on, they need to be able to say, we were aware of this and we took these steps. It's just about safeguarding. At the end of the day, just, kids are kids. And, people go through phases, whatever. And you know what? I would much rather any future people of mine change their name and pronouns 100 times rather than ever feel uncomfortable or unsafe in my classroom once. That's how I see it.
Okay, let me ask you a question then. So what's your views on trans women versus biological women in contact sports?
It doesn't really happen, does it?
but it's going to become more of a thing.
Is it?
We saw it at the Olympics, mate.
We didn't know.
Where we did.
Amen Khalif is a woman. She was
No,
born-
she's not, mate.
She is.
So there-
Sorry,
so
no. Right.
She's intersex.
Do you honestly think that Algeria, a country where it is illegal to be LGBTQ in any way whatsoever,
People won't go
would,
there.
no, do you think in any way whatsoever would let a trans woman represent them at the Olympics? Do you honestly think that?
I say she's intersex actually, and I also
But
see,
what-
there was
what-
another report. There was another report
Yeah.
that came out the other day, which shows that she has XY chromosomes.
Which report? From which organisation?
It was linked. It was leaked from the. I think it was leaked from the Olympics.
Because there was one. She passed all the Olympic tests, and then there was
couple of
another
days
report
ago.
that came out with the around the time of it. It was it was.
This is recent.
So okay, but what was the name? What was the report?
It was a report. I think it was leaked.
But you also have to look at what evidence they are citing, because there was a case where there was a report that said similar to what you were saying, but it came from a heavily discredited organisation.
That was a Russian.
And
yeah,
that report came out after she had beaten a Russian athlete. And you always find this where you have
Another report
where you have
since,
women of colour within sport who will beat their white counterpart, and they are immediately facing accusations of being trans. Serena Williams is a prime example.
Come on, bro.
No, mate, she's always-
Mate,
she's
okay,
always
as a
facing-
black man,
yeah.
trust me. Okay, I don't know. Maybe people that you hang around with, trust me. People didn't think Serena Williams. Yeah, she's a beast. No
Yeah,
one
but there
thinks that
would
she's a
always
man.
there would always be like sort of snidey
But
comments.
you can't compare that to someone that literally
No,
has
it's boxing. Like,
male physiology.
But no, but it's not. It wasn't. She was a woman.
Okay, well,
There are
mate,
some-
look at the next.
there are
Okay,
some women
okay.
that-
Well,
there are some
if I'm right, yeah, and she's got XY chromosomes, and what you saying? And anyway, this
Well,
isn't even the main thing, right?
Right.
She does have XY chromosomes. I would say she's intersex as opposed to a trans woman. Whatever
Okay.
you want to say. I don't think you should be able to compete in women's sports if you are intersex, just because you have an advantage. I know you'll probably say anyone can have an advantage if they're really, really good at something, but I want to ask you, because it's actually a better conversation about trans women.
Okay.
Do you think trans women should be able to compete? So someone that is biologically male. So I'm just going to get that. Do you think someone that's biologically male, transition to a woman, should be able to compete against someone that's been a woman the whole life? In a contact sport. So you won't have any problem with it if it's like UFC, because I've seen a trans athlete in UFC before. Sorry, not UFC, in MMA, shall I say.
Yeah.
You don't see any problem with it.
There'll be all sorts of barriers that will prevent that from ever happening. Whether it doesn't really,
Your view.
I don't really care. To be perfectly honest, with you, I do not care.
Okay.
You know, it's sport is sport, as you probably alluded to. Sport has many disadvantages. People have advantages. Some people have disadvantages, and to me, that's what makes sport great. Everyone likes the underdog story. You know, we have various leagues. Also, boxing is done by weight as well. People are going to have to. I did boxing when I was younger. I fought against people that were way bigger than me, way older than me. I still firmed it.
Yeah, but we have we have classes. Right, we have a difference in gender, right, for a reason.
Yeah.
Right. It's like how the American women's football team, amazing.
Yeah.
Like probably the most successful.
But it's also
women's
about
team,
opportunities
right?
as well. There's so many-
They play like the old boys class of Wrexham and get absolutely annihilated. They play a 15-year a team, I think, from Texas.
But wasn't that team
15
also
young
like
boys
quite
absolutely
older?
dominated.
Wasn't that team also like quite on the older side as well?
Yeah, still going, mate.
But wasn't that team on the older side as well? At the end of the day, sports always going to have different.
There's a reason why we have classes, right? You
Yeah,
can't
sure.
compare Andy Murray. Like Serena Williams even came out and said, "Look, if I played Andy Williams, I'd lose in every single set. It's a complete different sport."
Yeah, but then you also have like in tennis, you've got mixed doubles, haven't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, there's all these different things.
You
And
have
I think
one man,
when
you
you
have
look
one
when you
girl.
look at a lot
You
of-
have
when you
two
look at
girls.
when you look at the issues within women's sport, the things that stand out there is like funding, injuries. You know, the fact
That's
that
exactly
the
my
fact that
point.
like
You have
women,
two- but
yeah,
you have
the
one
fact that,
man,
like,
one girl.
the fact that,
You
like,
have
with
two girls.
with women's football in particular, there's so many ACL injuries because like boots, for example, have always been tailored towards men, never towards women. It's only been in recent years that women's football boots are actually starting to be made for women. They've always had to play in men's boots because they've never been available for women.
Come on,
There's so many.
bro. This is what I hate about this. You can't just be honest and just say
No,
like
I'm telling you, there are
men
so many,
are
there are
just
so
better
many,
at
there are
something.
so many
But the men are
issues.
more physical. No, but we're just talking about this. Men are more physical. It's just unfair.
But also, when you look at a lot of the cases, so there are websites where people can log where they've if they've had sustained an injury in a sport against a person that they believe to be trans, and again, it's who they believe to be trans. It's just like they can accuse anyone.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Okay, let's say your daughter becomes an MMA athlete, right?
Right.
You see, be honest with this.
Can't
now.
see that.
You never know. You never know. And she's competing. She's doing really, really well against women, and she's getting older, and she wants to compete at at a high level.
Yeah.
And she's versing a trans woman.
Yeah.
Who's been male for most of her life.
Yeah.
Transitioned to a woman, and is clearly. They might be the same weight.
Yeah.
But physically more dominant, got bigger muscles, whatnot.
Yeah.
How would you feel about your daughter going in against her?
Well, I'm always going to believe in my children, and I'm sure that they'll do the best of their ability.
I like it.
Do you know what I mean? At the end of the day, like you can.
I do it.
If you believe in your source, you believe in your source at the same time. If they've got their abilities.
I do. That was the only question I was going to ask you. That you'd be like, you still stick on side, but you got to respect it, man. You got to respect it. You've got to respect it. Okay, let's go through some quick questions because there's lots to ask you. So, thoughts on David Coote? Should he get the sack or not?
You know, he's clearly been on a few benders. Yeah, for sure he should get the sack. I mean, you can't. He was in that video of him doing snorting the white powder. Yeah. He was working for UEFA at the time. It was just after the quarter-final against Germany v Spain where he officiated. He was in a paid-for hotel by UEFA. The fact that they're having substances like that in there, for sure. I mean, like the guy's life is ruined. I don't know who's leaking these videos of him, but they've clearly got a vendetta against him.
It's quite funny. I've got a softer view on this than you. Really? I feel bad for him. I feel bad because I don't know really anywhere else in the UK that hasn't done any.
Oh yeah, for sure. Everyone's done it, but at
so
the same time, like I
biatch about their bosses and whatnot.
You know, I don't really. I don't care that he's done it, but it's like there's a time and a place for stuff like that. And if you're on official duty with
100%, 100%.
I mean, he's definitely fucked his career, and I'm sure that stuff will come out, and I hope that he is doing as well as he can do given the circumstances. Also, I think anyone who leaks anything to the Sun is an absolute scumbag.
Yeah, you're a scumbag.
Like fuck the scum. Like fuck the Sun newspaper.
Yeah, you're a scumbag. But
yeah, I think it's. I don't know what he's done to piss somebody off, but I think there's a lot of conspiracy about the PGMOL and the way that they're behaving, and like the way that referees are behaving in particular. There is ways you can look at. You can look at a lot of decisions that have gone against Liverpool's favour, like Odegaard playing basketball and stuff like that.
I don't think he's been at the helm. I think that would be my thing. If he'd been at the helm of loads of bad decisions against Liverpool, then clearly it's had an effect on his judgment. But I feel like a lot of us can hate our boss.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like the thing is, we only see. My family's had one interaction with Jurgen Klopp, and that was when he found my mother's sunglasses in Greece once. And I remember, and I think we there. It's not a surprise that they have those opinions about managers, players, etc., because they interact with them more than we do. We have a very weird parasocial relationship with our footballers and managers. We don't know these people. They do. And so, if that's what he said, that's what he said. I mean, the fact that a camera was clearly in his face and he was clearly on something and he chose to say
he was on drugs.
Yeah, clearly, and as we later see. So yeah,
he wasn't drunk.
The way I see it is just like, yeah, you know what, they...
Alright, let me ask you the next question. Quick fire.
Yeah.
Say, Israel Tel Aviv fans, can you give us the media cover up? I like that video.
Maccabi Tel Aviv fans, yeah, it was awful. The way that basically Maccabi Tel Aviv fans fucked around and found out. They rampaged around Amsterdam. They assaulted people, particularly Dutch Moroccans.
Yeah.
They were vandalising property. They were chanting "Death to Arabs," all this derogatory stuff about children. Insulted the victims of the floods in Spain. They deserve everything that comes to them. I honestly don't care. And they're basically Netherlands saying, "Nay, need longer here. We're not going to tolerate this anymore." And the fact that the media have, I remember speaking to my father about this when I came downstairs in the morning. I said, "Have you seen what's been going on?" He goes, "Yeah, I've seen like the headlines from like the Telegraph and stuff like that." "Oh, and no, have you actually seen what's been going on?" And he goes, "Yeah, no, they fucking deserve it." I can't believe that we've got the international community coming out defending football hooligans. I find that insulting.
So, do you feel like Israel is kind of like a protected class then?
I would definitely say they are Israelis are being given a lot more leeway than we can expect. So to give you an example, like back in 2016 during the Euros in France, when English football fans were getting kicked the shit out of Russians, there was no
language.
Sorry, they were getting attacked by the Russians, right? No one was defending the Russians' behaviour. No one was defending English people's behaviour because they were going around chanting "ISIS, where are you?" to French people, right? It's absolutely disgusting. At the end of the day, football hooligans are football hooligans. They're going to behave in a certain way, and that needs to be dealt with. But the idea that that the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans were victims of a pogrom is insane. They were not targeted for their ethnic identity, which is what happens in a pogrom. They were targeted because of their derogatory and disgusting behaviour towards Amsterdammers. So yeah, no. Guys in Amsterdam.
I always just find it so weird. Like something can be seen. I disagree with anything that's anti-Semitic, but I feel like the margin for error to be anti-Semitic is crazy. It's like if you said something like, "Oh, Jewish people run the music industry," that's anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
To be something that's racist against black people, let's say, it has to be far worse.
There's definitely a hierarchy of racism in this country.
There's a hierarchy,
sure. And I don't think anyone can begrudge that. Certain forms of racism are treated differently to others. And I think that says a lot about our society rather than anyone else. And it doesn't mean that the racism that a Jewish person receives is any different to the racism that a black person receives. It's about how it's dealt with. And if cases of anti-Semitism are being prioritised over cases of anti-black racism, something needs to be done about that.
Couldn't agree more. What an episode, my guy.
Thank you.
Wish it went on for longer. Thank you for coming.
So do
on.
I.